This is the Garden of English. I'm Tim Freitas. You're about to take an AP English exam, and I've got a friend who's got some excellent tips about how to immerse yourself in that. So let's listen to what she has to say. All right, I am here today, just a few days before the AP Lit exam, with another AP Lit guru, and that is my friend Nichole Wilson. And I'll let Nicole talk about herself in just a moment because she'll do a much better job than I will. Before I do, though, right, I would like to always give a shout out to our Patreon supporters whose names you will see in the middle of our screen. We are incredibly grateful to them for all the support that they do indeed offer to us. If you're interested in supporting the Garden of English in such a way, I encourage you to check out the video up there in the top left-hand corner because what that is, that will detail what we actually offer in relation to those that help support us in as our Patreon supporters do. So thank you so much to them. Now, I'm also super grateful because Nichole Wilson is here with me. That's like a dream come true. I've had Susan Barber one day, Nichole Wilson the next. It doesn't get any better. But Nicole, before we get into our tips for really, emerging into the exam, immersing ourselves in the exam, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
I got to know Tim by working with him through the Mosaic Conference planning, and we've developed a friendship. I'm an AP Lit consultant. I am a mentor through the College Board for AP Literature teachers, and I've been teaching for 20 years at Mason High School in Cincinnati.
All right, and also, one other thing too here is that today we're going to go over some lit stuff, and I really appreciate you approaching me for this because I think that these are great tips. But I think that I'm going to try to make them also a little bit Lang oriented as well. Not all of them, but this video will actually take care of AP Lit tips and AP Lang tips kind of together here. But we're going to focus on the lit because, if we have a lit expert here, I mean like precise expert, we're gonna want to listen to all that she has to say. So, all right, Nikki, why don't we actually take it away? Tell us why we're talking about this, and go right into our first tip.
All right. Well, let me contextualize it just a little bit. As a literature teacher, I always try to tell the students that this is a marathon, not a sprint. That we have to start getting in the right frame of mind at the beginning of the year, and we have to consistently think about how we're going to use all of those formative assessments that we do, how we're going to take that information, use that data, and inform how we move forward.
Absolutely.
So one of the many metaphors I use, and so, my significant other always tells me, you don't use metaphors in your class like you have a meta 5 or a meta 6 to contextualize stuff.
Yes.
So one of the metaphors is that of the Kentucky Derby. And the reason that I do that is because if you all recall, the essays used to be scored in Louisville. And the AP Lit exam usually takes place the week after the Kentucky Derby. So I thought it's a perfect metaphor to show how persistence is going to matter in this race, that it's not just cramming in the last few minutes, but it's about a concerted effort all of the way through.
Right, so and if we're taking more than one AP exam, we can go win that Triple Crown, right?
We can go win the Triple Crown. And I think it's all about relaxing. It's about that muscle memory that you built in all year. So if you're not feeling, and it's about confidence as well. Yeah. And so this is game time. I mean, this is race time. So the first tip that I have is take time to practice tests, especially if you feel like you don't have that muscle memory. So a lot of students are able to take one essay at a time, or to write one essay at a time, or to take one multiple choice test at a time. Yeah. But have you tried to do it in 3 hours with the pacing that's required for that?
Right.
Tim, do you find that's important with Lang as well?
Oh, I do. It's important for Lit and Lang. I actually make sure that I give my kids at least one mock exam every year, and I typically do it around the end of January or beginning of February, right? Now, if there's anyone who's like, oh man, I've never actually done that, but maybe I should try that, this kind of 3-hour span, or if it's in Lang, it's going to be a 3-hour and 15-minute span with an hour for multiple choice, and then 2 hours for essays in Lit, or 2 hours and 15 minutes for essays in Lang, right? There are places online where you can get decent practice exams, right? One of the places that I like to support a lot is Marco Learning, and they actually will give you a free practice exam for Lit and for Lang. They have other ones available to you that you can pay for, but they actually will provide you the first one for free, and it actually has the answers and explanations as to how the answers are correct. So if anybody wants that opportunity, right, Nikki, I agree. This is probably one of the best things. In fact, every May, I have at least one student who takes the exam who comes back to me and says, "You let us take the mock exam, and that made all the difference because we knew what to expect, and what it would feel like all together." So yeah, I completely agree. I think that's great first advice, right? Take that time, practice, find some way to do it, and then you've done your dry run before getting through there.
Absolutely. So coming back to the Kentucky Derby metaphor, I have students take a full practice one at the beginning of the year just to see how it feels. And then in April, they take another full run of them. Yep. And so the beginning of the year is the opening workout, or it might be, the Belmont Stakes. Yeah. Then we could do the Preakness Stakes, and that would be the second one. And then right at the end of April, we have our Kentucky Derby race. And so by the time the year is over, and I don't like to only focus on test prep, but the thing of it is I really love all of the different practice tests that we use. So I feel like that's really good for instruction, and it helps get them focused, which takes me to number two, to be intimately familiar with the test, like love the test, review those past released exams. Embrace it. I always try to encourage the kids, don't you love these multiple choice tests?
Take your test on a date. It's like, you go out to dinner and you're like, I'm just going to put my test right here with my soda, or I agree, right? Let's make sure that we are, we're dating that test. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Be familiar before you commit to marriage with the test, right?
Absolutely. But this is especially important this year, right? With not only being familiar with what it looks like, right, on the test day, because, I've had students in the past who have gotten their test booklets who've been taking them in person, and they'll read the selection and they'll answer the multiple choice questions on the side, and then they'll turn the page and they'll start rereading the reading selection, and then halfway down they'll be like, wait, I just read that. And it's like, oh, don't you know that they actually reprint the reading for you so you don't have to flip back and forth? If you don't know that, there's a chance you're going to be wasting a lot of time. You're absolutely right. What is this going to actually look like? But also on top of that, there's a new test format this year with the digital formatting. It's really important that kids are familiar with what the test layout looks like in that digital format. And please note the College Board has indeed offered a test, a practice online module so that you can look into that. So please make sure that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So for Lit, I want to talk just a bit about the format, things you probably already know. For Lit, it's 3 hours total. Multiple choice is first. That is 1 hour, 55 questions. So you want to spend roughly a minute per question. You get a short break, and then you have 2 hours for your 3 free response questions. The first one is poetry. The second one is the prose short fiction, so a prose passage of 500 to 700 words. And then the last one is literary argument that deals with a novel or play that will focus on some sort of an abstract concept, some sort of a universal theme.
Yeah. Right. And so, or I feel like sometimes though that literary argument can also be a lit element that allows itself to connect to a universal theme. Like my example would be something like setting. Like I've seen a lot of setting-based prompts, or another one was like a symbol-based prompt. But they're definitely, it's one of those things where it's like, how does this symbol influence the work as a whole? It's never just like, hey, pick a symbol and then tell us about it, Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So that Bildungsroman prompt is very much like that too, right? It's like, here's the element. Now, why is this the single pivotal moment that matters to an interpretation of the work as a whole?
Right. Absolutely, for sure. So, all right. So we've got tip number 1, which was like, hey, take your time practice test if you can. We've got tip number 2, be familiar with the format of the test, in particular, intimately familiar with the format of the test to the point where you're actually bringing it on dates with you, right? Number 3, what do we got?
Well, familiarizing yourself with the test content. Really, again, knowing what is involved with it. So the timing, so knowing the pacing there. So again, 1 hour for multiple choice for Lit, roughly 1 minute per question. Take a break, move on. The way I like to tell my kids to move through the passages and move through the questions, it's like a movie theater, right? Yeah. You've got to be immersed into the setting of it. You got to think through it. You got to immerse yourself in, and then you move on to the next question. Now, with the FRQs, remember, roughly 40 minutes per essay.
Right, and that doesn't actually change very much with the Lang exam. The Lang exam has 45 questions, but that's only because we've got the writing type of questions as well. And we also have 15 minutes added for the FRQs, but that's for reading for synthesis sources anyway, so it still averages to about 40 minutes per essay as well. Now, one other thing, too, about this idea of familiarizing yourself with the test content, and can you just talk to us a little bit about how the multiple choice questions seem to be set up in order when they're kind of on the page? Like, can you clarify that for us a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've noticed is that there's a strong correlation between how you might write about the FRQs and how you might look at multiple choice.
Yeah.
The question sets are arranged in the shifts of the poem or the passage. And so large, medium, and small little chunks. So if the students follow the shifts of the passage or the poem, that creates a line of reasoning even through the questions. And if they can follow that, then they're going to be more successful and they're going to gain some momentum for a final question that usually will deal with some sort of a thematic or universal concern.
Gotcha. So basically, like answering the multiple choice questions is almost like writing an essay. You just have the answers in front of you where it's just like, yeah, here we go. This is the first section. And that's one thing that I like to point out for AP Lang and for AP Lit. When it comes to questions that involve line numbers or paragraph numbers, they always go in order. You
Yep.
will not be asked to answer a question about lines 53 and as the second question in any multiple choice set. Like lines 53, if it's a 60-line passage, that question will be closer to the end there. So you'll never be going way back in order to do so. Now, if the line number is actually mentioned in the prompt itself. Awesome. Super cool. This is great advice. I really appreciate it, Nikki. All right, so we familiarize
also remember, with number 3 as well. And Tim, so sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're welcome to do so.
I just focus, like, remember that the multiple choice questions deal with the function of the big ideas.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to deal with the identification of literary elements anymore.
Right.
It's like, what is the function of characterization? What is the function of setting? The function of narration? And they've been practicing that.
You know, one thing too that I forgot to say here is that in my classroom, when we do multiple choice, I always make the kids find the universal ideas and universal insights, which basically is just another way of saying theme. I make them find that when they're done reading, because when they get to their answers on their multiple choice, the correct answer will relate directly to one of those universal ideas or thematic statements. And so a lot of times my kids can narrow questions or answers down to 2 separate questions, and I'm like, which one most closely matches the theme of the piece? That's your correct answer. And the way that I figured that out was one day I took a multiple choice and I just circled all the right answers, and I didn't read the poem, but I read the right answers. Yep. And when I read the right answers in order, I summarized what the poem was in my mind, and then I read the poem, and it was exactly that. And I was like, there you go. So the theme will dictate almost every answer there. Awesome.
Absolutely.
All right. I think we're on number 4.
We are. So again, we're going to go more into the FRQs. And so again, 2 hours for 3 FRQs for Lit, 40 minutes for each. And so the main thing is read the prompts, understand the prompts.
Yeah.
I find especially with the literary argument, a lot of students have done practice essays in the past. So maybe this prompt deals with idealism, but I practiced the cruelty prompt from the past or the sacrifice prompt. So I'm writing to that one. I'm not writing to what I see in front of me.
Yeah.
And so I think
that's problematic because they try to force a square peg into a round hole, and it's like, no, you can still write about the same book, but you got to write about it in response to that prompt, not the one that you wrote that you practiced in class. That's really important.
Yeah, and that's, I think, where the commentary comes in, because the thematic ideas, if they're practicing really pushing that out from those DOK level 1, it's like, what do I actually see in front of me with all of the prompts? Like, what's actually there? How do I build an interpretive position based on what I know and I see? But then how can I push that out into that thematic element that's so important? Remember, for the literary argument, you can't earn 4 points in that evidence and commentary row unless you do push it out.
Right. And on top of that too, right, you know, I'm thinking about the notes that you had sent over earlier about this particular point when you're talking about like journalism and then like writing your lead at the very end, you know, like and I think about this too. I actually, especially with poetry, I tell my students to write their topic sentences first based on the shifts in the poem, and then write their thesis after. Now, it doesn't mean that their thesis goes at the end of their essay. Their thesis is still their first sentence for me, but and their intro paragraph. I don't make my kids write full intro paragraphs, just their thesis for 10 writings. But because they've written out their topic sentences, it's very easy for them to write the thesis and toss it right on. And their topic sentences are based on the shifts that they see in the piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I are very much aligned on that. And so I always tell the kids again, the journalism thing, when I worked as a journalist, I would go to a city council meeting or I'd go to a school board meeting.
That sounds
I didn't
exciting.
really, I had 1 hour. I had 1 hour when I got back to write the story. And so I had to write it as I was going through the meeting. My ex-husband, he's a sports writer. He used to write while he's doing the game so that he can go back and write it quickly. And then you write your lead.
Yeah.
So strong recommendation.
Yeah, and that actually works out
practical.
really well in AP Lit. Not always so much for Lang because there's a lot of argument building as opposed
Yep.
to, but with question 2 in AP Lang, that could totally work as well.
With the rhetorical analysis, yeah.
Right, with the rhetorical analysis this year, because that's actually question 3 if you take it electronically.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, this year, only this year, if you have the electronic one. All right, so tip number 5 is actually for AP Lit in and of itself. This is a really important one for the literary argument, so take it away.
All right, so the first thing is prepare for the literary argument in advance. And so I know teachers tell their students a lot of different things. I feel that students really only handle maybe having 4 literary texts that they're going to bring into that exam. So review them ahead of time. Know the name of the author, at least, please. Know the names of the characters so they don't call them like the second tall man or something like that.
Right.
And then
the big dumb guy with George. Right.
that person. So I feel like the more they know and go back to, again, literature pieces that would encompass a wide variety of those universal themes or thematic elements. I also tell them to prepare, and I know in the lit world we do this a lot, like a 3x3. And it's not really just a plot point. It's like, what happens in the beginning, middle, and end. We could use something like, Vogler's idea of storytelling or Campbell's idea of the archetypal hero. It's really, what is the motivator for the character to move forward? Here's the plot point. Why does it matter?
Right.
If you can make that a little bit more concise in your mind. It's, 9 words,
Right. No, absolutely.
Subject, verb, direct, object.
What's so interesting is that I actually I tell my students they need to pick 3 books. So I always tell them to pick 3. And my recommendation is this. You got to have one book that's incredibly dramatic, right? And typically that's Macbeth or Hamlet. That's where, where they come in with that. I tell them you need to have another book that deals with some sort of coming of age, right? Yep. And interestingly enough, my students like to choose Frankenstein for that because they use the monster a lot. And I'm always like, wow, that's always intriguing to me that that's what they want to use, but it works. Like it's totally unique. But obviously the Catcher in the Rye or something like that would be way better, but it still works, right? And then I tell them you have to have one other work that has at least one moment that's hysterical. So at that point, you can answer a prompt about comedy, although I've only ever seen one. You can answer the dramatic work will answer just about anything at all. And then you've got that coming of age, which will be that moment of epiphany that something might actually ask for. And I'm like, you have to have, so I always tell my kids at least 3. And then my advice to them is the day before the AP Lit exam, they need to go read the Spark Notes for those 3 books. Because the Spark Notes are written well, right? I actually have a friend who writes for them, and he is no slouch. He is a literary connoisseur. And so I tell him, go read the Spark Notes. Not that you should only read the Spark Notes. It's you read the book and now you're reviewing. And then I tell them to write 3 thematic statements per each book. So they've got 3 books, 9 thematic statements where it's like, okay, this book illustrates this universal truth or this perceived universal exploration. And I'm like, at that point, one of those 9 will work for you in your literary argument. I can almost guarantee it. And then all of your characters and plot events will be fresh in your mind because you did it the day before or 2 days before. I think that this is totally a test that you could study for, and I completely agree with this. I think this is excellent advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about the humor, and there are actually a few prompts that do deal with that tension between comedy and tragedy.
Right.
What I found is that students, when they test with that, like I had my students do that the other day, and they struggle to come up with that operational definition of humor.
Right.
Not just that people are laughing, but that the humor is there to achieve some sort of effect that leads to a universal truth.
Right.
So I love that you do that.
Right. And I think about Brave New World when they like electro zap the babies that are reaching out for the roses. And like that moment when my kids read that, they're like, "Oh my gosh!" Right? And I'm like, "You just laughed at that?" And they're like, "What else are we supposed to do?" And it's like, good. It's not actually funny, but let's see what it's doing to kind of push this narrative forward about this culture. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
I had a student write to that prompt about Stephen King's Misery the other day. And it's like, I applaud you. But, because his operational definition was that it was so hyperbolic
Yeah.
and so exaggerated, he maintained the line of reasoning.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that can work. So those are the kind of three things that I typically add there. Okay. I think we're on to number 6. What do we got?
All right. So basically what we talked about before is the level 1 through level 3 analysis. So the DOK levels, I mean, again, basically, what do I see that's actually in the text, not what I want to see there. So
Right.
I'm going to bring up an example from when I was a reader on the landlady prompt from
Yes.
2019, the last time we were all together.
I know. I miss those days.
And so it was really extraordinary because in the landlady, you have a boarder or you have a landlady who brings these boarders in. And it's around, in the 1940s.
Yeah.
And so she is lonely. People reject her because she's super nosy. But a lot of students misinterpreted this, even like words. So there was one phrase about how she pads on the steps waiting for them to come home. And one student took that one phrase and made it be that the landlady is not actually a landlady, but a cell phone. And the pads are the pads on, a cell phone or on a keyboard. And it was this 3-page essay that dealt with a misinterpretation of one phrase because they wanted it to be there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we have to know. We have to make sure we interpret it for what it's literally doing right there, and then we can start bringing in the greater interpretations to the universal interpretation. And what's
Right.
interesting that you mentioned that is that's how I actually have my kids write their essays. What they have to do is every topic sentence has to be a brief summary of what the author is doing in the text. So the author presents, two characters arguing, and then they say, in order to highlight that one of them is a jerk. Now, notice how we take the two characters arguing, which is very concrete, and now we connect that to that character having that jerkish, character, that jerkish character, I guess. And that connects the concrete character to an abstract idea. And then when they get to their conclusion, they'll actually write about the universal insight. And so because of that, you'll see them go from the concrete to the concrete and the abstract, and then they finish at the entirely abstract. And you have to be able to navigate through that. You can't just keep jumping straight to the abstract. Absolutely.
And it's got to form a pattern. And so I love that you said that. My kids are so used to me now just writing L1 arrow L2. It's like, how does it get from L1 to L2? What is the function of that plot point? What is the function of why those characters are interacting?
Right, the what and the why. And I actually, so for me, and this is a good tip for kids, right? When you write any topic sentence, especially if you're taking AP Lit, you should try to have what's being done in the story and why it's being done in the story in each topic sentence. And then that's what you do to provide your commentary for that. Where is it seen? And then how does where it's seen convey that why? Awesome stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so
just one more tip with that, and I know we're running out of time.
No, that's
but
okay.
One of the things that I really want kids to see is that the words create a pattern.
Yeah.
Follow the pattern. Follow, especially with poetry prompts, the line of reasoning of the speaker.
Yes.
Follow that. How do those images change, develop, grow, create a pattern to push it out to more complex understanding of that character?
Awesome. And all right, so now we're on our last one. We've got our tip number 7 for how we navigate through into AP Lit, which we take in just a couple days. What's our last one?
So the last one is just to immerse yourself into the test. We talked earlier about the movie theater metaphor, about going in, sitting down, opening up your mind, in darkness, not the depression, but the darkness, you've got to be in the zone like an athlete. I remember a few years ago, it was a Super Bowl, and it was just a really precarious moment, and Tom Brady was called out. And the man is like a machine, no stress, nothing, just threw, a couple of passes and bam, they won. But it's the stress that prevents us from doing well. Right. So if a student can block out everything else, block out anything else, immerse yourself in the moment, that will be super helpful.
That's right. It's like erase everything from your mind except for fine dining and breathing. Oh, wait. No, sorry. This isn't SpongeBob. I'm sorry, right? Erase everything from your mind except for AP Lit for those 3 hours of your life, right? Really get in there and then take on every single one. You know, one of the things that I find super interesting is that my students do better with multiple choice if I give them more than one packet at a time. So if I give them one reading, right, they might get, you know, if it's a 15-question reading, the average will probably be between 9 and 12 questions depending on the particular reading, right? However, if I actually give them 2 to 3 packets at a time, they will almost always, as a whole class, will get about 60 to 65% of their questions right every time. And it's because it starts to put them in the zone where if they miss a bunch at the beginning, they get into test zone. So really embrace that because you can. And if you do, that's going to help you on test day.
Yep,
all right.
Absolutely.
So my last question is this, Nikki, right? If I want to get in touch with you, because you are indeed the lit guru, and we have a couple days till the lit exam, well, at least the first administration of the lit exam, how do I do that? What's the best way that I could tell the entire world to talk to Nikki instead of me?
Well, my email address right now, because I've got lots of different blogs, separate blogs for different conferences, you know, that I've spoken at or things, but I need to consolidate it. So for right now, it would be nicole.l.wilson@gmail.com.
Okay, I'll put that right up.
Nichole.
Just so you know, it's not up here now, but while you were just saying that, it's actually going to be on the bottom of my screen. So everybody will be able to see that right there, right? I want to just thank everybody for tuning in. Thank Nicole for actually coming on to hang out with us here. And the other thing, too, is this. If this video is helpful, we're going to ask that you press like and subscribe because that's the easiest way to help the Garden of English grow at all, okay? And then I also want to point out that we do have merch at our website, so you can go there and check it out. We've got mugs, we've got T-shirts, we've got posters and cool things like that, and we've got stickers now too, and that's kind of fun for us. On top of that, we are active on Facebook and on Instagram, so we ask that you send us a like there or connect with us on there. And you know, test day is coming up soon. We are in that home stretch. We are gonna, what did you say earlier? Make the run for the roses. Is that what you said?
Run for the roses.
That's right. Okay, and I hope that everybody does incredibly well on their exam. And Nikki, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Bye.